So we're finishing this first series, this first conversation that we started for this year. And not surprising to most of you, it started with a conversation around resolutions, right? Because it's the start of a new year. And I made a statement. For some of you, it's kind of rather a bold statement. But the statement was simply this 2 weeks ago, that good intentions are not enough. Our good intentions are simply not enough. Now, I get it. Sometimes things work out, right? But I'm guessing, especially if you're a parent, right? You've got a kid. I'm guessing if you've got a second grader and they come to you this week and they're like, Mom, Dad, look, read this really good story. Cool guy, Richard Branson, dropped out of school, made millions of dollars, has his own airline. He flies rockets to the moon now. I'm thinking no school for me. I'm guessing that most of you are going to say, don't care what you read or where you read it. You're going back to school, right? Sometimes things work out, but the reality is good intentions are simply not enough for most of life. And the same thing applies to our spiritual lives. And I don't know that most of us have paid attention to that. We just think that, God will just bless us or things will just happen to us. And yes, it can, but there needs to be some effort in our faith. So we started talking about what this means. And we started with really this idea that faith has to have some action behind it, right? It's not just this I just believe something so everything will work out. God will work things out, but he invites us to participate in his plan. So I said, as we look at the new year, and if we ask the questions, how are we going to grow in our faith? What could we do to challenge ourselves this year? I came up with a 3-step, very strategic, just easy little thing to apply to our lives. Now, I'm not telling you everything you should be doing. Understand that. I'm giving you kind of some groundwork, some framework, which you can build upon this year. And we started with this. The first one was simply, if you're going to map a new journey with God, that you start to meet with God daily. That you start to meet with God daily. Look, we all know that relationships don't work if you don't communicate. And the thing about communication is it always has to be two-way, right? We're really good about telling everybody what we want, right? Some of you are really good at it, and some of you aren't so good, but we're usually pretty good about telling people what we want. It's really hard to listen. So we talked about meeting with God daily. We said, what's it look like for you to meet with God and to listen to him, to begin to hear from him, to begin to lean into the things that you're learning from God? How do I calendar? What do I need to schedule? And for some of us, that feels really rigid, right? Like all of a sudden, I don't want to do that. Like I thought walking with God should just be organic and natural. And no, it's got to have some structure. We're invited by God to meet with him daily. So are we doing that? Are we arranging our relationship with God in such a way that we can grow, that we can mature, that we can move on and take steps of faith? Look, if I'm brutally honest with you, you know this. If you don't plan in life, if you fail to plan, your plans are going to fail. You know this about every other area of your life. You sign up and we work out, right? We sign up to go to gyms. Sometimes we go and sometimes we don't. But if you don't go, right, you can make the plan to sign up, but you still have to make the plan to put it on your calendar every day, get up and go. Right? You sign up to do things because it's important. Well, the same is true for our spiritual lives, okay? So meet with God daily. Are we starting to hear from God more and more? Second, we talked about last week, arranging our life around community. People require relationship. That's how we are wired. And again, we know this in almost every other area of our lives. It's why there are things like book clubs and sailing clubs and cooking clubs. And listen, if you do work out, and if you work out with this group called CrossFit, man, you know that there is community required to succeed. And they're rabid about their workouts, right? If you don't know any CrossFit people, you go to meet somebody, okay? You get to know them, because it's a whole other group of people that work out at a level that I probably never will, just being honest. But that's the thing. Life requires community. And we put it in so many other areas of our lives. The question is, are you putting it around your spiritual life? Are you giving God a chance to work through other people, to lead you, to be in community, to be challenged, be sharpened, not look like everybody else, right? It's not about uniformity, it's about unity, growing in community. All right, arranged life around community. Today, here's the thing. I'm going to give it to you, and then we'll talk about it. We're gonna talk about pursuing life on mission. That's the P of mapping a journey with God. Pursuing life on mission. Can you think of in your life a time when maybe you got embarrassed because you got caught in a moment when you didn't do something right? Like maybe you were trying to use a utensil or a piece of equipment, and for some reason you thought you knew how it was supposed to work, but you didn't really. So you got caught using something absolutely wrong. Maybe you're this person right here. Maybe you're the person who thinks it's time to go to the gym, but going to the gym, I don't want to let on that I've really never been to the gym before. So I'm just going to go and I'm just going to do what every good Texan will do. I'm just going to figure it out, right? And I'm going to go and I'm just going to start exercising. And maybe you're this guy and you're just afraid to ask. But let me tell you what, if you are, somebody's going to snap a picture of you today, because we all have cell phones in the gym, and they're going to put it out on social media that you don't know how to use the equipment. But maybe this is you. Maybe this is you. You're just gonna you've never been in the gym, but man, I'm just gonna figure it out, and you get embarrassed by using it wrong, right? Maybe this is an area I like. Maybe you've never been real handy. You've never been a person who works in with tools much, and maybe you've just decided that you're going to start using tools more. And you're this guy. Now, if you've never used tools, I'm just going to tell you straight up, this guy's doing it wrong. You don't grab a drill press and turn it sideways. First of all, you can't; it's too heavy. But he's using this tool wrong, and surely somebody caught him. I'm hoping it's a posed picture for a principal, maybe this. But for whatever reason, he doesn't get this right. Maybe though, you're this person like me. You dream of one day maybe having a boat. But you've never really gotten instructions on how to put a boat in the water. Maybe you're this person, you just thought, well, this seems like it's easy enough. And trust me, this guy, it's not going to be easy. Or maybe this one last guy, maybe you're trying to save a little bit of money and you think, how hard could it be to cut limbs off my tree? I'm just going to save a little bit of money because these tree trimmers, they charge a lot. Maybe I'm this guy. Maybe I just am going to do this and see how it works out. Okay, these are silly. But I have been in certain situations before where I don't want to admit I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know the purpose of something, and I start trying to use something and start trying to figure it out, and I do it wrong. We've all probably been there. Now, here's the thing. At the very least, it could be embarrassing, right? At the very worst, with a dangerous piece of equipment, it can be dangerous. It can be life-threatening. So the question I want to ask you, the question I want to start with this morning is, what's the purpose of the local church? What's the purpose of the local church? When we talk about churches and why they exist, what is the reason that we're here? See, here's the thing. I tell you this all the time. If you're new, maybe you've not heard me say it enough yet, but this thing we call the church has nothing to do with the building. A building is just a place where churches meet. But a church is the people. You're the church, right? You don't go to church, you are the church. I don't like talking about church services. I like talking about gatherings where church gathers. Because you're the church. This building is just a resource. It's a tool that churches use. Why? It's because when you have a club that's growing, you got to have a place to meet, right? But you are the church. And whatever that function is of the church, it's got to involve our lives because we are the church. So it's not just about the building or the sign or having somebody attend an event. The function of the church has got to involve us. And see, here's the thing, and you know this already. Somebody in your life has gotten church wrong. Most of us in here have had an experience where the purpose of church was wrong. Somebody did it wrong. And the thing is, when something is used improperly, it's at the very least, it's funny or embarrassing, right? I actually had to look this up. I can't believe this, but I want to show you a picture of a church. Here's the church with apparently a water slide on stage for their baptistry. This thing went viral about 2 years ago, and I kid you not, they actually have this on Snoops. Like, you go to Snoops to figure out, because the question was, is this real? And so the Snoops investigated to discover that indeed it is not real. Somebody made it up. So, so you see something like this and you think to yourself, what's the purpose of the church? And is the church really supposed to have water slides on stage? Now, I'm crazy enough, I might do it, but I get in trouble for a lot of things. I'm just saying, at the bare minimum, it can be embarrassing or silly if we get our purpose wrong. But a bunch of you know what? You know more than embarrassment, you know more than silly. When the purpose of the church is not right, you get hurt. People get hurt. Some of you have been hurt. I've heard Andy Stanley say it. I've heard other pastors say it. I believe it more and more. Most people don't leave a church because of what God says. They leave a church because of what the people of God say to them. Think about that. Most people, they don't stop going to church. They don't stop believing in God because of something they heard from God. They actually stop because of what they heard from the people of God. Right? The church living out its purpose maybe in a bad way. So, listen, the answer is not to just throw the church out. The answer is not to say, hey, this doesn't work, so I'm gonna scrap it all. That would not, in fact, if you did that, I would argue that you'd play into the culture of the day. That's kind of childish, right? Life's hard. We all know that. We're all old enough to say life is messy. So the answers aren't always clean. So if you're here, you probably are at least giving church a chance, right? Maybe there is more to church, and I hope that's what we're discovering. But what is the purpose? I want to start real quick, and I'm going to start in the Bible, because I think the answer has to originate from the Bible. Now, come back starting next week. I'm going to spend several weeks talking to you about the Bible. I'm really excited about this next conversation. So grab some friends. Trust me, if you've got somebody who's asking questions about, is the Bible real? What's it about? Come back, because I want to talk you through some things. But we're going to start this morning. I'm just going to tell you straight up, the answer's got to come from the Bible, and let me tell you why. Because I have to get an answer from somewhere. And if I don't get it from the Bible, that means I'm just going to get it from me or another source. And if I do that, how do I know it's correct? Think about that for a second. If we're just talking about opinions this morning, then I'm sure everybody in this room has an opinion about what should happen at a church service or at an event. And that's fine. Opinions are fine. There's nothing wrong with opinions. But when we talk about our purpose, if we don't get our purpose from someplace else other than ourselves, then maybe you're just listening to me spew a purpose that God doesn't even believe in, or God didn't even intend for us to think about. So we've got to get a purpose from somewhere. And I want to challenge you that the reason the Bible is so sacred, the reason the Bible's held together for so long, the reason is not just because it's reliable. I do believe it's reliable, but it's because we've got to come up with an answer from somewhere. And if I don't pull an answer from the Bible, then I've got to pull it from somewhere else. And you have to pull it from somewhere else. So at least when we go back to the scriptures, we can talk about something that we can go and look at and weigh in on, right? Something we believe is from God. So what is the mission? We're going to start with some of the last words that Jesus spoke on this earth before he finally, after his resurrection, went back into heaven. You can imagine, if you could for a second, think about the scene. Jesus' disciples have walked with him, at least 12 men, very closely for nearly 3 or plus years. It might have been just a little over 3, but right around 3 full years. They've lived with him. They've eaten dinner with him. They've heard his teaching. They've seen him do some crazy things, like he can gather a crowd because he can heal people. He can make the dead get up. Like the world has never seen this before, and he's done all of these things. But something happened the night he went to trial. His disciples got nervous and they scattered. They flaked out on him. He was put to trial. He was put to death in just a horrible way. And after that, his disciples are trying to figure it out. Like, what has happened? He's come back. They don't, but before he's come back, they're asking the question, what are we supposed to do? And they start remember some of the things he taught. And they said, hey, didn't he tell us that when he would go away, that we were supposed to meet him somewhere? So they start to realize that. So they go to this place, Matthew 28. Jesus is just coming back, and they're in this one place. Verse 16, we're going to pick it up. It says, the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus told them to go. And when they saw him, watch this, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Okay, if you've got a pen, I want you to, in your little brochure, your little handout this morning, I want you to, or maybe if you got it on your phone, highlight. You can highlight in YouVersion if you know that. You can highlight verses to go back and look at. I want you to highlight the last part of that verse, 17. But some doubted. I love that verse. I don't know when I saw that for the first time, but I love that verse. Think about this. Jesus had 12 disciples that he had walked with for 3 years. One of them washed out. Judas sold out. He ended up not believing it, and he hangs himself. So he's down to 11. These 11 flaked out the night of the crucifixion. They all dispersed. They were scattered everywhere. They were scared, and they didn't know what to believe. They all get together, and Jesus shows back up, and look what it says. It says, some worshiped, but some doubted. Here's what I know. Some of you have a lot of doubts about your faith. And I just want you to understand that you're in some good company. See, I think the problem where we start with is we tend to think that Christians are supposed to be people who have it all figured out. They're supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to do everything the right way. And I'm telling you, the 11 that walked closest with Jesus for 3 years, some of them still doubted after what? After he was resurrected. This guy got up out of the grave on his own, did something no other man has ever done, no other woman has ever done, no other person has ever done, walked out of the grave, and some of them still doubted. And I want you to notice that Jesus doesn't yell at them. He doesn't get mad. He doesn't tell them they're not true followers. Watch what happens. It says some worship, but some doubted. See, when you doubt, here's what happens. When you doubt, sometimes it pulls away from your worship, right? It's not having enough confidence, enough faith in what's going on. And so you gain some doubts in your world, and you don't worship as well. It doesn't mean that you're not a believer. It doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that you've been wrong all this time. It just means that for that moment in time, for some reason, you're uncertain. Maybe it's because there's some sin in your life. Maybe it's just because you haven't learned enough about Jesus. Maybe you just don't know some things about him yet. But some of these 11 followers doubted. Now, what I want you to pay attention, and we're not going to get there today, but if you were to go from Matthew 28 to the next chapter, anybody know what the next chapter is? Yeah, see that? I tricked you, didn't I? There is no 29. But with all of the Gospels, when they end, you know what happens? Luke picks it up in Acts chapter 1. And he says, hey, Theophilus, I want to write some more to you about what happened with Jesus. And he picks the story up in Acts 1. And you know what you see in Acts? You see those 11 disciples, and the doubt's gone. It's gone. They were together. They stayed together. They learned from Jesus, and they walked it through, and Jesus sent his Spirit to indwell them, and there was a confidence and a power, and the doubt is gone. So whatever the mission is, when they get it, they get it. But you can still have doubts at times, and we want you to know that because it's okay to ask those kinds of questions around here. It's okay to have doubts. But stay in that community. Remember we talked about last week. Stay in that community so you can work those doubts out. Let's keep going. Verse 18. We'll get into the main text now. Then Jesus came to them and he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them, the ones that have become disciples, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely, here's the promise, I'm going to be with you always to the very end of the age. This passage has been written on so much in the history of the church because this is it. This is the big, we call it the Great Commission. This is when Jesus, before he's getting ready to go back to heaven, he says, here's the job. Like, here's what I'm leaving you to do. I'm commissioning you. You ever been to a commissioning service? I mean, you can do this for anything. One of my shows that I like to watch is Blue Bloods. I don't know if you watch those kinds of shows, but I love that show. I just kind of love the grit behind it. And every once in a while, a new set of officers will come through, and what will they do? They'll put them in like a swearing-in service. It's a commissioning service where you bestow somebody the rights and privileges of a certain office. Jesus is saying, look, you followers, I have something for you to do. I need you to do, this is what I'm asking you to do. We already know. What do we know? We know we're supposed to love God. We know we're supposed to love others. But here's how I want you to do it. I want you, here it is, to make disciples. What's our mission? Make disciples. What are we supposed to be about? Make disciples. Say it with me. What are we supposed to do? Make disciples. See, I think it's clear, but I think we've lost it. I think for some reason the church today, we've gotten so distracted by so many other things and arguments and bickering and trying to figure out who's right and who's more right. And I think we're missing this piece, that our real mission is to make disciples. You say, well, I thought I was just supposed to love God and love others. Yes, but this is how you love God and love others. You show God that you're on his team. You live into life the way he's asking you to live into life. You help others do what you're already doing, walking with God. It's not, listen, Jesus didn't set this up. He didn't make a seminary class. He didn't say, everybody's got to go to seminary. He didn't say, you got to join a monastery, and for the next 5 years, I want you to go in. You're going to take a vow of silence. I don't want you to talk. I just want you to, he doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say, I need you to meditate for 3 hours a day, and this is how you're going to become a good follower of mine. He says, I want you to make disciples. And go back to verse 19, because the wording is important here. You're going to get a little language lesson. You're not going to like this, I understand. But verse 19, he says, therefore go. Go literally means, are you ready? Write this down. Literally means go. It means to go, to travel, or I love this one, to journey. Therefore, journey. Therefore, go. And that, here's the thing, that the way that's structured, you're gonna, again, lesson, you're gonna hate this. It's an aorist participle, that go. That simply means that the action that's there, that's right before that participle, right before the verb, means the action comes before the verb. What's the verb? Make what? Make disciples. So as you go about life, make disciples. Not leave your country to do it. Not you got to go hide somewhere. You can only do it when you're together on Sunday mornings. As you go, as you journey, as you live life. That's the mission. Make disciples. As you live life, make disciples. You don't have to, listen, so many people, I get tired of this. So many people will look at a role that I have like this, and you think, oh my gosh, that surely it's more favored that Cecil gets to teach the Bible. If I could, if I was good enough, or if I was really a good Christian, that's what I would aspire to do. No, this is just my role. This is, my family couldn't get me to stop talking, so I became a pastor so I can talk on Sunday and you can listen, right? I mean, it's part of what I do. Our whole mission for all of us is to make disciples. Not my mission, our mission. This is where we've messed up. We keep expecting pastors to do everything, or pastors to make it work, or paid staff to make things work. No. Church, make disciples. That's what we're invited into. And listen, I'm gonna sympathize, empathize with you. I know some of you, like, you're just sweating when I start talking about that kind of stuff. Like, it makes you nervous to think words like proselytize come into your head. Oh my gosh. It's a terrible word today, right? It's just been abused, and for various reasons, I understand why people don't like the word. Evangelize. Oh my gosh. No. God didn't call me to be an evangelist. I'm not supposed to evangelize. You get nervous. I get it. In fact, there's even a conversation today about whether we should try to convert anybody, right? These words that kind of come from past experiences with Christianity. Some people, even in your mind, you may go back to the Middle Ages and the Crusades, when the church did horrible things in the name of God. But what did we say a while ago? We have to get our mission from somewhere. And even though the church has possibly, probably at times in history gotten it wrong, that doesn't let us off the hook. You're sitting here today with the translation of the scriptures that has afforded you that 2,000 years ago everybody didn't have. And you can look at it and you can see Jesus saying, go make disciples. As you live your life, as you journey through life, do this thing for me, make disciples. I know it makes you nervous. I know it makes you sweat, but let's back up for a second. Let's talk about what it even means to make a disciple. Let's go to the front end of Matthew's whole little letter, and let's look at what happened when Jesus started making disciples. Go to Matthew 4 for just a second, or flip over in your brochure. We're supposed to be making disciples. We know the mission now. But now back up and look at what Jesus started doing in Matthew 4, verse 18. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother. They were casting nets into the sea, for they were fishermen, where all godly people are by the sea. Verse 19. Sorry, that's a personal preference. That's an opinion. That's not in the text. Verse 19. So Jesus says to them, follow me. Underline that. Follow me. Follow me. In Greek, it means follow me. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. He used a picture. He used an image that they were familiar with. They were fishermen. If he was talking to guys in a field with a combine who were harvesting corn, he would have said, follow me. I'm going to make you a harvester. He was talking to fishermen. Follow me. I'm going to make you fishers of men. Verse 20, immediately they left their nets and they followed him. I always put a little caveat in here. You need to understand, in their culture, this was very common that a rabbi would be in an area teaching. So it is very safe to assume they had already interacted with Jesus. We read this and we think, oh my gosh, like he just said this one sentence. They dropped everything. How did they know? No. They knew Jesus already. They already knew some of the things he was teaching. It doesn't mean they understood them all, but they knew. Immediately they left their nets and they followed him. Verse 21, and going on from there, journey continues. He saw two brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, and in the boat with their Zebedee, their father, and they were mending nets, and he called them. Doesn't say what he called them, it just says he called them. What did he call them? Same call he just issued the other two guys. Follow me, verse 22. Immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Immediately. And when they left that boat and they left those nets, you know what they were leaving? Their jobs. They left their jobs and they started following him. Now, as odd as that sounds in our culture, they understood in their culture that rabbis would take disciples, and these disciples were actually just students. And so when a rabbi would go in an area and he would teach, it wasn't uncommon for a rabbi, if he got a really, really sharp student somewhere, to say to that student, come follow me. And what would happen is, as you walked with the rabbi, you would typically start doing this around the age of 15, and it was men because it was that culture of the time, right? So we don't shy away from saying that. It was what it was. But he would invite them to step into being a disciple, a follower who would walk with the rabbi so close, you begin to learn all of his teachings, all of the way he would deal with people, all of the things he would say, all the things he would teach, all of his uniquenesses. You would walk with him and you'd learn all of this. And about the age of 30, if you had learned well, the rabbi would turn and hand you a mantle. He would basically give you the ability to now be that kind of rabbi and to go out and take more disciples. It was just a natural way of doing life. If you don't know that, it just sounds really weird. How am I supposed to make disciples? Am I go out and proselytize, convert? Paul does use the term win, that he's seeking to win people over, but it's not beating people up, right? It's not, proselytizing, evangelizing, converting, winning in the scriptures has nothing to do with judging people, with cutting them down, trying to tell them they're wrong, trying to convince them their life is so messed up that you're better than they are. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what Jesus just did. Follow me. It's inviting people to discover what it means to follow Jesus. Now, can I be real honest for a second? This is uncomfortable. A bunch of us, we have trouble offering for somebody else to become a disciple. You know why? Because we're not convinced sometimes just yet. Like we're not fully convinced as disciples. Like, it's nice to follow God when things are going good. Yeah, I mean, God's in charge, right? It's easy to say that. But when life is falling apart, sometimes it's just easier to think to yourself, I'm just going to stay silent because I don't know what's going on here. You become a disciple when you get really, really convinced about something. A few years ago, some of you know this story, that my daughter started having some health issues. And we sent her to doctor after doctor after doctor and couldn't figure the things out, and that frustrates me. So we began to investigate other areas, things that for a long time I had not given much thought to. How diet plays into the health of the body, how our surroundings, even the chemicals in our homes, play into the health of our body. If you talk to my family now, we're kind of disciples of that. Like, we'll tell you that we believe that there are some things that you can do to make your body healthier. We're not radical about it, but we do believe it. We're disciples of it, right? You spread a message that you believe in. You spread a message that you're convinced of. So I guess the question really is, how convinced are you this morning? Fill in these blanks. You will make disciples when you're convinced Jesus is worthy of having disciples, not when you become the perfect disciple. Let me say it again. You're going to make disciples when you're convinced Jesus is worthy of having disciples, not when you become the perfect disciple. If you wait to invite somebody into the journey, to discovering who Christ is, you'll be waiting the rest of your life if you wait to do it when you get it all figured out. I love Paul. Paul was such a radical guy. He would kill Christians. So you can imagine when he first started going around and talking to people and saying, I want to talk to you about Jesus, people would back up, say, talk to you later. They all knew. They just thought it was a trap, I'm sure. This guy's trying to get me into a conversation. He wants me to agree about Jesus, and then he's going to cut my head off, right? I mean, they feared this guy. They should have. But after Paul had this encounter with Christ, you know what he did? He started going to people and he said, look, follow me as I follow Christ. 1 Corinthians 11:1, he says it this way, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Some of your versions will say, follow me. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. It's not about me being perfect. It's about me following Jesus and saying, hey, have you discovered what I have discovered? The truth of the Bible is not about me being right and everybody else being wrong. The truth of the Bible is about this thing that's in me that's messed up. We sang it a while ago. One of the choruses we were singing a while ago. Change me from the inside out. If you ever want to know why I get mad in traffic, it's because there's something still rotten in me. Right? If you ever want to know why I say things I shouldn't say at times, it's because there's something still rotten in me. And if you're waiting for me to be perfect, church, if you're waiting for your pastor to be perfect, if I'm your excuse for not following Jesus, you're never going to live a life on mission. You're always going to struggle with this. Our mission is to make disciples and to help people find and follow Jesus Christ. Make disciples, which is simply helping people find and follow Jesus Christ. I love Tim Keller. He says it this way. This guy's really sharp. He says, disciples are messengers. Every disciple of Jesus is given a message to publicly communicate, urging everyone to believe it. What is it? That Jesus Christ is the answer. And I'm convinced of that. But I need you to know I'm convinced, not because I just woke up one day and said, oh, I think this is right. I'm convinced because of what I come to after laying the scriptures on my life, looking at the rest of the world, weighing all the answers, and coming to the truth that God is exactly who he says he is. Jesus did what he said he did, and we can trust him and rely on him. And that's what I invite people into in my life. It's not about my personal preferences. It's not about my personal convictions. If you want to talk about my personal preferences and convictions, that's great. We'll talk about it. And I'll even talk politics with you off the record. But it's not about my party affiliation. It's not about some kind of dietary fads that I think are better than others. It's not about the clothing styles. You know, I once had a mother, when I was doing youth ministry, corner me. Actually, it was in front of a large audience. And press me on the issue of whether or not my youth ministry staff was going to stand at the back door of the youth building and ask young ladies who were wearing spaghetti strap tops to not come to church that day. Folks, I think there are standards, but I think you have to decide what those standards are when it comes to your dress, when it comes to what you eat. I'm telling you, my family, we believe certain things about chemicals in our homes, but we're not going to tell you you have to believe that. The thing I want you to know is how to be a disciple. Because that's my purpose, that's my mission, and I think it's the church's mission. There's other great things, but those are the places we can disagree. We can do other things. Listen, some of you in here, somebody at this church is part owner of a gym. And do you know what they do? They're constantly sharing Christ at the gym. They're constantly bringing people to Journey, having conversations. So some of you show up to work early. Why? Because there's a Bible study in your office, and it's not that you're going to go to the church with those same men and women, but you're there and you're there early, and it's some people who just want to be there, and you're learning how to make disciples in your workplace. Some of you own your own businesses, and you pray and process and strategically think not just about how the business profits, but about how to make disciples in the context of your business. You know what that is? Pursuing life on mission. Nobody in here is without that mission. It's all of our mission. It's the mission of the church. It's what unifies us. This person of Christ, it's why we can come together and we can all have different voting preferences or parties or football teams or hockey teams, because everybody should have a good hockey team. We can all be different. We don't have to be uniform. We have to be unified around the person of Christ. Why? Because his mission is that we make disciples. There's a card that was in your worship flyer this morning. We printed these up just to be as a reference for the next year, to be as a reminder about how to map a journey with God. So the 3 statements are on the front: meet with God daily, arrange life around community, and pursue life on mission. And then on back are some questions to just get you thinking about those 3 things, 3 areas. Everybody's going to have different ways that they carry this out. But listen to me. Everybody in here should be pursuing life on mission. It may look really different than you from your neighbor sitting next to you. It may, if you're an introvert, it's going to look radically different than people who are extroverts, right? And you don't need to feel like you got to do it their way. You have somebody in your life that's really loud and embarrassing, like they'll just say something to their waiter in the restaurant or and you just catch you off guard. They'll talk about Jesus no matter what happens, and you just feel really embarrassed. It's not because you're not a Christian. It's because the personalities are a little different sometimes. Let them thrive. Let them do what God allows them to do. But you look for ways to do it too. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be obnoxious. The world has too many voices yelling today. Are you ready to pursue life on mission? Are you ready to put some names down? To begin to think about how you can serve these people in such a way that they find and follow Jesus Christ just like you have? Are you ready to share your story? Let me pray for us.